So you just have a purchase agreement signed and your realtor asks you for earnest money. What is earnest money? How much is it? How is it handled? Et cetera, et cetera. I'm here with Peter Lindquist, a really great mortgage broker here in the Twin Cities. My name's Travis Anderson. Let's talk about earnest money.
Travis, today I'd like to talk about earnest money. What is it? How does it work? People have a lot of questions about it. What can you tell us about earnest money?
You know, earnest money is really a good faith to the seller and your seriousness to buy a home. That's probably the best way to put it. And so that means then that the larger the earnest money amount, the more serious you are as a buyer. That's really a perception of seriousness. Obviously, you could be an extremely serious buyer with very little money, but it gives the seller the perception of your seriousness in buying a home.
And I think also the appearance of financial stability. Would you agree that if I'm buying a $300,000 home and I give a large earnest money check, let's say $20,000, which would not be recommended, but if I did, I am clearly financially strong because I had 20,000 in the bank that I can just throw as opposed to a $500 earnest money check.
That's probably the better way to put it. So if the idea is that it shows your seriousness, I think that's partly true. But more than anything, it does show your liquidity, which is what you're describing. If you have the money, yeah, you're showing the seller either how serious you are or how liquid you are, or maybe a combination of both. I think that's probably the right way to put it.
So I write this earnest money. How much do I normally write?
Yeah, earnest money is negotiable. So it can be really any number. In Minnesota, anyways, it's not even actually required. So we can, in the purchase agreement, there's a section for it, but you can have it be zero. So it is negotiable. It can be as high as your down payment. It can be as low as $1. I'm normally seeing what I would say there's no standard in real estate. Everything's negotiable. But Peter, I'm normally seeing 1% of the purchase price. So if it's a $300,000 home, $3,000. $500,000 home, $5,000.
While we're on this topic, I want to note that for some buyers, especially first-time home buyers who are using down payment assistance, the source of those funds are critical. So if you get an earnest money check, and I know you're the kind of agent that would warn me if you saw this, and the earnest money came from somebody other than the buyer, parents, for example, wrote the earnest money check, you would get in contact with me because that can be problematic under some loan programs. Can it be a way to compete with other offers? I mean, how important is that to a seller?
Yeah, it is an important term. I'm glad you asked that. I wrote 3 offers over the weekend, and each of the offers, we addressed the earnest money and how to make that more of an important term. The reason I say more of an important term, Peter, because at least in Minnesota, if you have an inspection contingency as a buyer and you choose not to buy the home during that inspection contingency for any reason, in fact, you don't even have to inspect the home, but for any reason, you can cancel the purchase agreement and receive your earnest money check back. Well, that makes that earnest money not that important to the seller. So how can we make it that important to the sellers? You could make it non-refundable, or you could make it non-refundable after inspection period, or you could make your inspection only mechanical and structural, something like that. And then that number, whatever it is, even if it's a lower number, it becomes much heavier to the seller, let's say, than just the number alone.
So if I'm making an offer on a $400,000 home, I want to help with some of the math here. 1% is $4,000. So I write this $4,000 check, and 3 days later, I wake up in a cold sweat and I say, oh man, I shouldn't have bought this house. I gave the seller my $4,000. What's the difference if it's 3 days later or let's say 2 weeks into the transaction? What happens to that earnest money?
During the inspection period, and that is a negotiable time frame in Minnesota. So maybe you negotiate 7 days. In that 7-day period, you could cancel for any reason, and then the buyer would retain the earnest money would be refunded to the buyer. If it's after the inspection period and we get cold feet or we wake up in a sweat like you're talking about, you really shouldn't have the right to cancel in the contract, unless something were to happen in another contingency, like maybe we have a home to sell, or maybe our mortgage, we don't approve for our mortgage or something like that. So the earnest money is really designed to show the seller, look, if after the inspection I just walk away, then I'm going to give you that earnest money. Now, I am going to give one caveat here, Peter, and I do have a previous video that people can reference where I say earnest money is a joke. We're not going to talk much about that in this video, but even after inspection, there is a separate document that has to be signed. So it's not as black and white as you might think. But the idea is that I'm going to inspect the home, I'm going to obtain a mortgage, and if both of those things are able to happen, or if I get past both of those things, then I should be buying the house. And if not, I expect to lose my earnest money.
One thing I just want to address from the financing end, it's a very common question. How is the earnest money treated in the transaction from the financial side of things? I'll have people say, hey, I have a contract on a $400,000 home. I wrote $4,000 earnest money. So I'm really buying the home for $396,000. And that's wrong. You're really buying the house for what you paid, $400,000. The earnest money is a credit towards the total cash out of that you need to buy the home. Let's say I tell you that you need $30,000 to buy the home and you've written $4,000. That means that money is being deposited by the listing agent's trust account that's going to be held there until the day of closing. And the $4,000 is a credit towards the $30,000 you need. It's not a credit towards the sales price. It's a credit towards the amount of money that you need for the full transaction. And then when you get down to closing, instead of owing $30,000, now you owe $26,000.
Earnest money actually is kind of confusing, Peter. I think this video, we've touched on it a little bit. We could probably, as weird as it sounds, we could talk about earnest money for 30 minutes. We're not going to do that, obviously. And so if anybody has any questions when you watch this video, whether it be earnest money in the mortgage process or earnest money in the real estate process, just, do us a favor, give us a call, and we can talk through that.